The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Empire hummed with the low murmur of 300 species discussing strategy. The curved walls lined with holographic displays showed the same troubling images. A dense jungle moon supply ships disappearing, and battalions of the Empire's finest warriors vanishing without a trace. High Admiral Vorex. His crystalline exoskeleton, catching the light as he gestured toward the central display, spoke with undisguised frustration. Another elite squad lost. 72 hours on Kethalor, and not even emergency transponders activated. Earth's representative, Colonel Sarah Hayes, sat silently at the far end of the horseshoe table. Humans were temporary members of the Galactic Council. Tolerated rather than respected. Earth had joined the interstellar community barely 2 decades ago, and despite their rapid technological adaptation, humans remained primitive in the Empire's estimation. These rebels have primitive technology, but unmatched knowledge of the terrain, continued Vorex. They use the jungle like a weapon. Our advanced targeting systems are rendered useless by the canopy density. A Centauri commander, skin-shifting through patterns of blue and gray to indicate skepticism, leaned forward. Perhaps this problem requires a primitive solution. The room fell silent as all attention turned to Earth's representative. Colonel Hayes stood her posture military perfect. The Empire has lost 6 elite squadrons in as many weeks. Your battle drones are shot down by the crudest of traps. Perhaps this is a situation where human special forces might prove effective. Laughter rippled through the chamber, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and translated guffaws. Grand Marshal Zex, the Empire's most decorated military leader, regarded Hayes with compound eyes that reflected her image 100 times over. With all respect to our Earth colleagues, what could a human operative accomplish that our legionnaires cannot? We have warriors bred specifically for jungle combat, with genetic enhancements and neural interfaces. Hayes's expression remained neutral. One SAS operative. No advanced weapons, neural enhancements, just standard Earth equipment. Give us 72 hours. To accomplish what exactly? Asked Vorex. To demonstrate why humans should not be underestimated. Grand Marshal Zex's mandibles clicked in what translated as amusement. Very well. Consider this a public relations exercise, if nothing else. One human operative 72 hours. When this fails, perhaps, Earth will better appreciate the true complexity of galactic warfare. Colonel Hayes nodded once sharply. We'll need transport to Kethalor by 0600 tomorrow. As the council adjourned, Vorex approached Hayes. This operative must have a name for our records. Hayes handed over a data crystal. File designation Phantom of Earth. The rest is encrypted by Earth Command. The Empire's intelligence officer nearby scoffed. What archaic security protocols? Hayes smiled thinly. Sometimes old methods work best. Tss. The drop pod pierced Kethalor's atmosphere silently, its heat shields designed to disperse thermal signatures rather than deflect them. Inside Sergeant Mason Kane, the man known in classified files as Phantom, checked his minimal equipment one final time. No exosuit. No neural link. No energy weapons. Just a combat knife, a modified Earth rifle with specialized ammunition. Basic survival gear, and the fruits of 20 years of the most grueling training humanity had devised. The onboard AI spoke in clipped tones. Approaching drop zone. Planetary conditions, 92% humidity, 38 degrees Celsius oxygen, content 27% above Earth standard. Kane nodded, his face impassive. He'd studied the environment extensively. The dense jungle of Kethalor was Earth's Amazon rainforest, on steroids, thicker, more alive, more deadly. Perfect. Empire observation satellites will be in optimal position to track your landing. Continued the AI. Good, said Kane, his voice a low rumble. Let them watch the drop zone. As the pod descended toward the designated landing area, Kane initiated the emergency override. The pod's trajectory shifted sharply, accelerating toward a sector 20 kilometers east. The AI's voice remained calm despite the unauthorized maneuver. Colonel Hayes anticipated you might do this. Message: Good hunting, Phantom. Earth is watching. Kane allowed himself the ghost of a smile. No, they're not. No one is. The drop pod crashed through the thick canopy deployment chutes, activating at the last possible moment. Kane was moving before the hatch fully opened, disappearing into the emerald darkness of Kethalor's eternal twilight. 5 kilometers away, rebel sentries heard nothing. The rebel encampment sprawled through 3 kilometers of jungle. Advanced technology blended with primitive construction, salvaged Empire weapons, mounted on platforms of local wood communications arrays disguised as natural formations. Phantom observed from a position high in the canopy, cataloging guard rotations, supply lines, and defensive weaknesses. He had not moved for 6 hours. The rebels were a mixed group of species, united by their opposition to the Empire's expansion. Their leader, a massive reptilian Drakthor, paced between shelters barking orders. Even from this distance, Phantom could read the anxiety in his movements. Their success against the Empire had made them confident, but something had changed in the past 48 hours. Supply ships hadn't arrived. Phantom had spent his first day setting explosive charges at carefully selected points along the incoming supply routes. Primitive devices by Empire standards, but effective and, more importantly, untraceable to Earth technology. The rebels would blame the Empire's sophisticated weaponry, and the Empire would be mystified by attacks they hadn't launched. As darkness fell, Phantom moved silently through the upper canopy toward the encampment's food storage. The rebels had become dependent on regular shipments rather than local foraging, a critical weakness. He extracted a small vial from his belt. The compound inside wasn't lethal, but anyone consuming it would experience extreme gastrointestinal distress for approximately 48 hours. By dawn, he had contaminated 3 water sources and the main food storage. On the 3rd day, Phantom observed the results of his handiwork from the high canopy. Half the rebel force was incapacitated. Communications had been disrupted after he'd spent the night placing signal jammers at key points, crude devices that would appear to be natural interference. The rebels were growing paranoid. Sentries fired at shadows. Arguments broke out between different factions. The word began to spread through whispers that someone was in the jungle. A phantom. Phantom allowed himself a grim smile. The psychological warfare had begun. High Admiral Vorex studied the reports with increasing disbelief. The rebel communications have gone silent. Their supply ships are failing to arrive, and our long-range scanners are detecting unusual movement patterns. Grand Marshal Zek's compound eyes narrowed. What is the human doing? The Earth liaison officer, who had remained silent during the briefing, spoke up, creating chaos. With primitive weapons and no support, scoffed a Centauri commander. Your Empire thinks in terms of technological superiority, replied the liaison. Sergeant Kane thinks in terms of psychological advantage. Vorex turned to his intelligence chief. What do we know about this phantom? Very little. Earth Command's file contains numerous redactions. His service record includes operations in what they called theaters of unconventional warfare. The psychological profiles describe him as unsettling. The Grand Marshal made a dismissive gesture. One human cannot turn the tide of this conflict. Perhaps, said the liaison officer, but I suggest you watch closely. The real demonstration has barely begun. By the 5th day, the rebel camp was in disarray. Not a single shot had been fired yet. Half their force was incapacitated by illness. Supply lines had been cut. Communications were unreliable, and the whispers had grown something was hunting them. Phantom moved through the jungle floor now, placing small devices at irregular intervals. Simple motion-triggered noisemakers. Some would emit sounds like footsteps, others like whispers, still others like the distinctive click of higher weapons being armed. Tonight would be the tipping point. As darkness fell, he activated the first wave of devices. From different points throughout the jungle came sea and sounds that triggered instinctive fear, footsteps that approached but never arrived, whispers in languages associated with predator species, branches breaking under invisible weight. At midnight, he triggered the second wave. The distinctive sound of Empire plasma rifles charging echoed from a dozen directions simultaneously. The rebels broke. What had been an organized resistance devolved into chaos. Some fired blindly into the darkness. Others fled their posts. The Drakthor commander roared for order, but panic had taken hold. In the confusion, Phantom infiltrated the command center and planted false intelligence data suggesting an imminent full-scale Empire attack. By morning, the rebel leadership had ordered an evacuation. Phantom observed from the canopy as the rebels scattered into the jungle. His mission parameters had not included destroying the rebel force, merely demonstrating Earth's capabilities. The rebels would regroup eventually, but their aura of invincibility had been shattered. He was about to extract when his thermal scanner detected new heat signatures entering Kethalor's atmosphere. Empire ships, dozens of them. The Empire had decided to join the hunt.
No.
Grand Marshal Zex personally commanded the deployment of the 9th Legion, the Empire's most advanced fighting force. Cyborg warriors with integrated AI systems, exosuits capable of adapting to any environment, and drones that could penetrate the densest canopy. This human has done what our previous forces could not? Zex addressed his commanders. He has disrupted the rebel stronghold. Now we will eliminate both threats with one decisive strike. The intelligence officer raised a concern. Sir, Earth Command expects their operative to be extracted, not targeted. We are not targeting the human. Zex's mandibles clicked with thinly veiled amusement. We are conducting a standard cleanup operation. If their operative is as skilled as they claim, he will avoid our forces. The Earth liaison monitoring the communication recognized the implicit challenge and threat. A message was dispatched to Kethalor immediately. Be advised, Empire deploying 9th Legion to your location. Possible hostile intent. On Kethalor, Phantom received the transmission and deleted it immediately. He had already observed the Legion's deployment pattern, a standard containment grid designed to close systematically, leaving no avenue for escape. For 72 hours, the jungle remained quiet. The Legionnaires established perimeter positions and began their methodical sweep. Their sensors detected no human biosigns. Their drones found no heat signatures matching Earth physiological patterns. On the 4th night, a Legionnaire on the eastern perimeter failed to report for check-in. His tracking signal showed him at his post, but he did not respond to communications. When the retrieval team arrived, they found only his exosuit still transmitting vitals, propped against a tree. The soldier was gone. Grand Marshal Zex received the report with disbelief. One of our elite Legionnaires taken without triggering his emergency protocols? Impossible. The security recordings showed nothing. One moment, the Legionnaire was at his post monitoring the perimeter. The next moment, the camera feed flickered briefly, less than a second of interference. And when it returned, only the empty exosuit remained. Phantom had struck.
Soon,
the 9th Legion initiated full alert protocols. Pairs of Legionnaires monitored each sector. Drone coverage was doubled. Thermal scanning sensitivity was increased to maximum. Phantom observed these measures from a carefully constructed blind in the high canopy. The Empire forces were formidable but predictable. They relied on technology to compensate for instinct. They trusted systems over senses. He had spent the past day studying their thermal scanning frequencies. Every system had limitations, thresholds, above and below which objects became invisible. The jungle itself provided the perfect cover. Certain plants on Kethalor emitted heat signatures that created blind spots in standard scanning equipment. Moving only during the brief windows when the drones rotated their patrol patterns, Phantom positioned himself above the command post. Grand Marshal Zex had established his headquarters in a clearing surrounded by concentric rings of security. Phantom waited until the tropical downpour began a daily occurrence on Kethalor that created additional interference for the Empire's sensors. Then he moved. A small device, no larger than an Earth insect, detached from his equipment belt and drifted down toward the command center. It emitted no energy signature the Empire could detect because it was purely mechanical, a throwback to Earth's pre-digital age. The device landed on the command center's roof and immediately began to dissolve, releasing a compound into the environmental system that would affect the psychological states of everyone inside. Not a poison, nothing so crude or detectable. Rather, a subtle compound that heightened anxiety, disrupted concentration, and induced mild paranoia. By morning, the command staff was reporting equipment malfunctions that didn't exist. Security teams were responding to alerts triggered by phantom readings. The perfect military machine was developing microfractures from within. Another Legionnaire missing. Grand Marshal Zek's voice carried the edge of disbelief. That's 3 in 36 hours. The security chief, a cybernetically enhanced Vexra, displayed the surveillance footage. The pattern is the same. Momentary disruption of surveillance, then empty armor, no signs of struggle, no alarm activation. This is impossible, insisted Zex. The 9th Legion has never suffered losses like this. These are our most advanced warriors. The intelligence officer, who had been monitoring communications from Earth, cleared his throat. Sir, I've been analyzing what little information we have on this phantom operative. His psychological warfare approach is unconventional. Explain. He's not trying to defeat your forces through direct confrontation. He's undermining their psychological foundation. Your Legionnaires believe they're invincible because of their technology. He's systematically destroying that belief. Zex's compound eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting a single human is outmaneuvering the Empire's most elite fighting force? Not outmaneuvering, sir. Outthinking. Phantom crouched in the muddy hollow of a massive root system as Empire drones swept overhead. The extraction window had come and gone. Communications with Earth had been severed by the Empire's jamming technology. Colonel Hayes would be under intense pressure now with her operative presumed captured or killed. But Phantom wasn't concerned with extraction protocols. The mission had evolved. The Legion commanders had made a critical error in their response to the disappearances. Rather than consolidating their forces, they had dispatched smaller search teams, making them even more vulnerable. Phantom had already taken advantage of this, eliminating 2 more Legionnaires during the night. He hadn't killed them. Death would have unified the remaining forces against a common enemy. Instead, he had used a fast-acting sedative and relocated the unconscious soldiers to a cave system 5 kilometers away. They would wake disoriented with no memory of what had happened, adding to the psychological uncertainty spreading through the Legion's ranks. His thermal scanner detected a patrol approaching his position, 2 Legionnaires in full combat exosuits, accompanied by 3 surveillance drones. Their pattern suggested increased caution. They were learning. Phantom remained perfectly still as they passed within meters of his position. The mud and local vegetation he had applied to his skin disrupted his heat signature enough to blend with the background thermal noise of the jungle. One of the Legionnaires paused, looking directly toward Phantom's hiding place. The Empire warrior's helmet contained sensory enhancements that could detect minute changes in the environment, breathing patterns, pheromones, even the subtle electrical field generated by a human nervous system. Phantom controlled his breathing using meditation techniques to lower his heart rate to near hibernation levels. For 30 seconds, he essentially disappeared as a living organism. The Legionnaire moved on. Once the patrol was out of range, Phantom retrieved a small device from his equipment pouch, the last of his specialized tools. It was time to accelerate the psychological collapse. Oh? Grand Marshal Zek stared at the holographic display, showing the positions of his remaining forces. In just 5 days, the 9th Legion had lost 8 soldiers, not dead, but vanished without explanation. Morale was deteriorating. Equipment malfunctions had increased exponentially. Even the command center's environmental systems were behaving erratically. "We're fighting a ghost," muttered his second in command. "We're fighting a human using primitive tactics," Zex corrected sharply. "There will be a pattern. Find it." The intelligence officer who had been monitoring Earth communications approached cautiously. "Sir, I've been analyzing the psychological impact of these events on our forces. The uncertainty is more damaging than actual combat losses would be." "Your point. The human isn't trying to defeat us militarily. He's demonstrating that our technological superiority can be neutralized by psychological warfare." Zex's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Are you suggesting we withdraw, admit defeat to a single primitive organism?" "I'm suggesting we recognize the actual objective of this exercise. Earth sent their operative to prove a point not to engage in extended conflict." Before Zex could respond, the command center's lights flickered. The environmental system emitted a high-pitched whine, then shut down completely. Backup systems activated immediately, but the momentary darkness had a palpable psychological effect on the staff. When the systems reset, a new message appeared on the main display screen: 72 hours extended. Lesson continues. The message vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving no trace in the system logs. Zex stared at the empty screen. How did he access our secure systems? The intelligence officer shook his head. "He didn't need to. He just needed us to believe he could." By the 7th day, the remnants of the 9th Legion were in full retreat. The official report would cite environmental hazards and tactical reassessment. But everyone involved knew the truth. They had been defeated not by superior firepower or technology, but by fear itself. Grand Marshal Zex stood before the Galactic Council, his posture rigid with suppressed rage. "The operation on Kethalor has concluded. The rebel threat has been neutralized." This much was true. The rebels had scattered their once formidable resistance, reduced to disorganized groups fleeing through the jungle. But it wasn't the Empire that had broken them. Colonel Hayes sat silently at her position, her expression carefully neutral. And our operative, Zex's compound eyes fixed on her. No trace was found. If he survived, extraction is his responsibility. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. The Empire had attempted to eliminate Earth's operative rather than extract him as agreed. The Grand Council leader, an ancient Vexra, whose crystalline form had accumulated the wisdom of 3 centuries, spoke for the first time. "This demonstration has been illuminating. Earth's methods, while primitive by our standards, have proven effective in specific contexts." Hayes nodded once, acknowledging the reluctant praise. "However," continued the council leader, "one successful operation does not elevate Earth to equal standing within the Empire." "We never expected it would," replied Hayes. "We merely wished to demonstrate that technological superiority isn't the only measure of effective warfare. Humans have been fighting each other for millennia. We've learned a few things about the psychology of combat." Grand Marshal Zex interjected. "Your operative abandoned his extraction window, presumed lost." Hayes allowed herself the smallest smile. "I received confirmation of Sergeant Kane's extraction 2 hours ago. He is safely aboard an Earth vessel returning to our space." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. How had a single human evaded the Empire's blockade of Kethalor? The council leader raised a crystalline appendage for silence. "It seems we have indeed underestimated Earth's capabilities. A formal acknowledgement will be added to interspecies protocols regarding human military potential." As the council adjourned, Grand Marshal Zex approached Colonel Hayes privately. "Your operative, this phantom, what is he?" Hayes considered the question. "Just a man, Marshal. One who understands that true warfare happens in the mind before it happens on the battlefield." "The Empire will adapt," said Zex stiffly. "This technique will not work again." "Perhaps not," agreed Hayes. "But now you'll always wonder what else we might have learned during our long, violent history. And sometimes not knowing is the most effective weapon of all." 3 months later, a classified report circulated among the Empire's highest military echelons. Kethalor had been designated a restricted zone ostensibly for environmental research. In reality, the Jungle Moon had become a psychological no-go zone for Empire forces. Rumors persisted among the species of the Galactic Council. The jungle of Kethalor was haunted, they said. A human ghost, a phantom, still moved through the emerald twilight. Legionnaires refused assignments to the sector. Security drones malfunctioned inexplicably when they crossed certain boundaries. On Earth, Sergeant Mason Phantom Kane received new mission parameters. His success on Kethalor had elevated humanity's standing, but also made the Empire wary. Other species were re-evaluating their dismissal of primitive human tactics. Was it worth it? Asked Colonel Hayes as they reviewed the mission archives. Kane's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes, a shadow of the psychological warfare specialist who had brought an empire to its knees without firing a shot. "They won't underestimate us again," he said simply. Hayes nodded. The Council has formally recognized Earth's unique tactical perspective in their military protocols. We're no longer classified as primitives. "They're still wrong," said Kane. "They think it was skill or training that made the difference." "What was it then?" Kane looked out at the sunset over Earth's ancient mountains, a view older than human civilization, yet infinitely younger than the stars where the Empire had evolved. "Fear," he said finally. "Not the fear I created in them. The fear we've lived with since we first huddled in Keps. Humans never had the luxury of feeling invincible. We've always known there's something stronger, something smarter out there in the dark." Hayes considered this. "And that makes us dangerous. It makes us survivors." Kane turned from the window. The Empire evolved without natural predators. Their technology removed environmental threats generations ago. They've forgotten what it means to be hunted. And we haven't. We never will. Kane gathered his minimal gear, the same equipment that had overcome the Empire's most advanced technology. That's why they'll never truly understand us, and why they'll never stop fearing what we might become. As Kane left for his next mission, Hayes reflected on the Empire's official designation for Earth in their updated protocols. Approach with caution, psychological warfare specialists. It wasn't respect exactly, but it was a beginning. In the vastness of the Galactic Empire with its 300 species and countless technological marvels, the primitive humans had carved out their niche, not through superior firepower or advanced science, but through the oldest weapon in their arsenal. The human capacity to inspire fear. The ghost of Kethalor would live on in the Empire's collective memory, a warning that some enemies couldn't be defeated by technology alone. And somewhere in the stars, a phantom moved silently toward his next mission, carrying with him the primal lessons of a species that had survived against all odds. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that knows what it's like to be prey.